So, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of Cuts International, let me welcome you to this webinar on the occasion of the World Water Day. As you all know, World Water Day is a day which is celebrated on 22nd of March as per a resolution of the United Nations. And today is 23rd March, so we are celebrating it a day later for various reasons. I don't want to get into those details. But before I come to the theme of this year's World Water Day and introduce our speakers, let me take this opportunity or the occasion to pay our tribute to, on the occasion of today's Shahid Divas, pay our tribute to not just to Shahid Bhagat Singh ji, Shahid Sukhdev ji, Shahid Rajguru ji, but crores and hundreds and thousands of known and unknown Shahids who fought for our independence. So I thought that would be a very appropriate, this would be an appropriate occasion to pay our tribute to them on behalf of all of us, from all of us. Now coming to the theme of this World Water Day today, as you know that this year's theme is on groundwater, making the invisible visible. So we don't see groundwater, but this is much more than just a part of it. I don't want to get into the data and, if I may also say, the quagmire of data. But we do know and understand that our challenge is increasing by the day. Challenge in respect to the use of groundwater, challenge in respect to its conservation, and as a consumer, so I'm sticking to that point, we do have right to water. So how are we going to balance our right as well as our responsibility, particularly in respect to the use of groundwater in this context? Therefore, I think the United Nations has taken a right decision to observe this day as per this theme this year. And we have a very eminent, excellent set of panelists, speakers who are going to educate us on this subject. And I would request them, all of them, not just to tell us about the challenges, but also to provide us the solutions so that a better distros, where our contribution is to make, this is our objective, so not contribute. Our objective is to make a good, well-informed contribution to the current discourse on the utility, on the need for conservation of groundwater. With that note, let me first request Mr. Gopal Krishna Agarwal, who is the author of this book, Water, an Element of Life, its price sensitivity and consumption by the marginalized. As we know, we may think that we are getting water for free, but that's actually not the case. So I would request Gopalji to tell us his thoughts on this subject in about, including solutions, of course, in about 8 to 10 minutes. Over to you, Gopalji.
Thank you, Mr. Chatterjee. I would like to, from my side, wish my co-panelists Shubha Ramchandranji, Joydeep Guptaji, and Matthew Cherianji, and even Pradeep Mehtaji, who is going to join in our deliberation. And I would also like to thank Cuts International for giving me this opportunity, and wish everybody today present who have spared their time in this seminar, convey my good wishes to all of you. The topic we have been discussing at every level about water. I would like to mention some of the important key points that I think are important as a solution and the policy making also. Because as I have been associated with various policy making at the government level, I think there are certain conflicts and there are certain issues with regard to water which are very important from the public side of view for the debate so that there is a clarity on those issues. The first and foremost point that I would like to mention here in the limited time that is available is, should water be considered as an economic commodity? This is the most important part when we are talking about the provision of potable drinking water to all the citizens of the country, to everybody at every length and corner of the city. So the important thing is, as an student of economics, we have been reading about various commodities, allocation of their resources, issues which involves the allocation. So the most important part in this is, what if there is an issue of allocation, equitable allocation to different sections and segments and the areas, is how to allocate the resources and consider it as which form of commodity. So on the economic side of it, the water is never considered as an economic resources, economic commodities. Why? If you consider, because it's a merit good. There are two types of commodity. One is which are essential for the life, which are essential for our well-being, which are essential for our day-to-day life. And there, if we consider those goods as economic commodities, then certain problems arise. So water is a merit good, and therefore, when we are talking about water as a merit good, and its essentiality for the existence of life, even human being, plants, and animals, then it should be provided as a public good. This is a well-established doctrine that water being a merit good is not an economic commodity and is essential for life. Therefore, it should be provided as a public good, that the government it is the responsibility that the government provides potable drinking water to all segments of the society. This is the first point that I would like to underline in my various studies and research over the period. The second important point that I would like to convey here in the discussion for further other panelists and other questions is, there are several conflicts in the allocation of water. The most important conflict that comes to in our day-to-day life is equitable access. There are different segments, their economic strata is different, there are different other considerations, etc. So how to give equitable access to water and how to allocate it between its competing uses, then the issue of quality, then the issue of availability and affordability. So these conflicts are very important for the government to resolve into its policy making. And for that, one point I would like to mention here is, when I was talking on the first point about the economic commodity or essential for life, is price sensitivity, because this is a major conflict in various discussions, is about the amount a family spends on water, and how much consumption of water or demand of the water is dependent on the price sensitivity. Because the policy making everywhere, it is what should be the charge on the supply of water is an important issue for household water supply. And in my study, which has been referred by Mr. Bipul Chatterjee also, is on the price sensitivity on the consumption of water. And what we have found is that the price sensitivity of water, if you want to debate and discuss on the price sensitivity, the amount of money spent on consumption of water in relation to the overall household income, we found that it has a very low percentage of expenditure of every family on water consumption, and it is less than 5%. And the important point that was we found out was, as you move from the lower strata of income from the people to the higher strata of people, for the consumption and the money spent by those families on water, the percentage of the amount spent on consumption of water comes down, further falls down as the income of the family rises. So the issue boils down that when we consider about the price sensitivity, the amount of money spent by the families on the consumption of water is so minuscule that, and it is an essential element if you look into the both issues, the price sensitivity of water falls down very drastically. And we found that generally the consumption and demand of the water for drinking and daily household use is price insensitivity, and it falls further, the sensitivity falls further as the income group rises. We go for a group of household which have higher income. So what we have found is the consumption of water is price insensitivity, but in that also it is the sensitivity of the lower income group is higher, and that becomes an important policy input, where we have to consider that the lower income, the marginalized people, the poor sections of the society, for them the price sensitivity is higher than the people or household groups which have higher income. So if you look this point into consideration, then pricing of the water is not very important as a tool for consumption of water. This is quite different from the general perception that price can be used as a tool to manage water. So therefore, various schemes of the government, various policies, etc., we find that there at least essential potable drinking water for daily household activities, which is very important for the day-to-day life, sanitation, health, etc., should be provided by the public government as a public merit good, and the pricing should not be there. This is one of the important points that I would like to underline. Then the third point that I would like to underline here for our discussions and further research reports or anything is about the doctrine of public trusteeship. We have been this year talking about the groundwater. The issue in our country is whether who owns the groundwater, who owns the water. And our constitution is very clear on this aspect, is that the groundwater or river water or other water, the ownership of this water resources in the country is with the government only in the form of a trusteeship. The ownership is not there even with the government. So when the ownership of water is not there with the government, nobody who doesn't have the ownership can transfer it or create rights on the water. So the third important aspect I would like to mention here is, in our constitution is very clear that the water resource, all resources of the country regarding the water, there is a doctrine of public trusteeship. The government, local body, authorities, etc. are not the real owner of the water. It is the public which owns, and they have as a trusteeship have to manage the distribution and availability and other things. So this is the third point that I would like to mention here. And the fourth, the most important point, and in addition to this, is on the water right issue. At present in India, there is no legal law on the ownership of water, provision of water, it is only through the derived rights from the court cases that we say that right to water in the country is part of Article 21, where it is part of right to life, because it is an essential element for the life of the people. So therefore, it is part of right to life, where there are several court cases which cast the duty on the government to provide drinking water, free drinking water to everybody, potable drinking water in the form of a derived right as a part of right to life. So what is important at present, also in the future discussions, is that we need to have a very certain larger perspective, where there is a law which clearly defines the responsibility, puts the right to water in some legal framework. At present, there are no law governing specifically provision of water to all citizens. So this is an important part which is under the debate in the various platforms, and which should form a part of the larger debates. And in India, the status of water, it is a state subject, and there are conflicts around the water being use of water between different states. So certain issues which further need discussion on the part of everybody is about the issue about interlinking of water, interlinking of rivers, ecological feasibility of the interlinking of rivers. It's not merely an economic issues which has to be discussed, because our constitution provides that provision of water is a state subject, though interlinking of rivers is a part of the central government. They can make policies with regard to allocation of river water, etc. So this is an important issue where further discussion and clarification is needed. In the last point that I would like to mention is that, considering all these issues, water right issue, various conflicts involved in the equitable access and other competing uses, etc., whether it should be considered as an economic commodity, or what is the price sensitivity, how the consumption by the marginalized or poor sections have to be impacted, and the government is taking several initiatives through the Jal Jeevan Mission, provision of tapped water to every household. Then what will be the costing, because there is definitely a cost involved into the purification and the provision and distribution of water. So these costing issues, etc., have to be resolved. And I think there is a high time that we have a national water framework law. And in 2016, our government did try to come out with a national water framework of law, which tackled all these issues, including the state and center and ownership of groundwater, etc. But that did not find the light of the day because it was lapsed. And though we need a very strong, clear-cut national framework water law, that is important, that I would like to mention. And the last point that I would like to say here is for conservation. So conservation of water is very important, because we see that there can, if water is not properly conserved and preserved, then we can lead to a situation where there will be serious water stress into various areas and various seasonal differences, etc. So there has to be a strong conservation move from everybody, and for that, the best methodology which comes out from our discussion and study is creating awareness on the conservation, making conservation a mass movement, conserving water bodies, conserving groundwater, recharge of groundwater. All these issues are required for conservation, preservation and of water, and they can come through mass movement and public participation. So at a policy level, at the awareness level, NGOs have a big role, and I think this is an important mechanism where organizations like CUTS and other organizations, we have been working on the Jaladhikar Foundation on conservation, preservation, and revival of water bodies and other awareness campaigns, and government is also working. So to meet out a water for everybody, these issues need a lot of clarity and discussions. Some of the issues, important issues that I have dealt with in my just small presentation have been in detail with a survey report, research report, have been dealt in this my book that Mr. Chatterjee was mentioning. We have tried to deal with these issues and are working on the ground to meet out these issues. So with this opening remark, I would like to thank CUTS for giving me this opportunity to give my opening remarks.
Thank
Thank you.
you, Gopalji. I mean, given everything that you have said, it's very evident that looking at water, particularly potable drinking water as a public good, is not a difficult subject. But we need to do a number of reforms, both at the national as well as state level, including regulatory reforms. Now, I'll not get into the details. Let's hear from the other experts, panelists. But all I would need to, I will say that it's not just the content of reforms. You also have to be very careful and thoughtful about the process of reforms. On that note, let me now request Mr. Matthew Cherian, who is the chair of CARE India. He wears a number of hats. I'm just mentioning one of them. And he has some years of experience in this sector. So let's hear from Mr. Cherian in about 8 to 10 minutes, sir. Over to you.
Thank you, Bipul and Pradeep Mehta, for inviting me for this webinar on making the invisible visible. And what I see today is that there has been a great pressure on groundwater, and across the country there has been great amount of water stress due to pumping out groundwater indiscriminately across the country. And there is also a report that says Rajasthan, the home state that we are all in, will be highly water stressed by 2030. So in the early days, a lot of my work in Rajasthan revolved around watershed, where many of the NGOs, whether it was Rajendra Singh or whether it was Sikodicon and whether other agencies, we were trying to recharge the groundwater aquifers, trying to make the invisible rivers become rivers, trying to exploit cuttings in the desert areas, and also deepening the nadis, which were all the sources of water. So in all this, one aspect came out very loud and clear, which was the wisdom of the people and the community knowledge. All over, we found that the people knew where the aquifers began and where the aquifers ended. They were not blind to this, and they believed in conservation. That was one of the major lessons that we learned. So even with a small kadin in Jodhpur, they could harvest a crop of bajra. They could also harvest a second crop at times. And as a result of it, many of these communities were self-sufficient. Then also came the whole issue of the plant species which were planted on the watersheds. Rajasthan is blessed with the great tree, I would say, the Kejari tree, which is also a big source of conserving water. And it provides nutrients for people, for the camels, for the various sheep and goats which are there. So it is a it is a really like a kalpavriksha of Rajasthan. So this is something which we need to look at. At CARE, some of our efforts has been on adaptation to climate change, and how do we harness this community knowledge, how do we create participatory knowledge systems so that they can adapt to climate change. In this, I'd like to say that lot of the crops that we grow, if we look at a place like Manaklav in Jodhpur, where they pump out groundwater indiscriminately and grow chilies, and all the crops are really water guzzling crops, and at the end of it, in a few years, you will find not much of water in that area of Jodhpur. So we have to look at adapting and growing alternate crops, whether it is bajra, whether it is jowar, and we need to have a total emphasis on dryland crops, because 60% of the irrigation water across the country comes from groundwater. It does not come from canal water, it does not come from other sources, and groundwater is essential. So this can only be conserved by alternate crops, which may require, of course, minimum support price for purchase of jowar and millets, etc., which are more healthier and with at the same time consume much less water. Then there is also the issue of the National Water Policy of 2012. And the National Water Policy of 2012 also said we have to promote biodiversity along watersheds. And this is something which is essential, because if we do not promote biodiversity, then what will happen is there would be less and less water recharging into the aquifers. So, a lot of my experience is in rural India, where we need to grow appropriate trees, not the horrible eucalyptus trees which suck out water, or even poplar which sucks water. We have to grow trees which will, like the kejri and other trees, which will be local, resistant to, and also conserve water. So this, if we can combine these different knowledge systems across the country, because currently a lot of CARES work is in Orissa, in the uh, Kalahandi, Koraput, Bolangir district, KBK districts. Some of you who worked will know. These districts have been perennially drought prone, and there has been also starvation in these districts. Today, with climate adaptation strategy, these districts are growing adequate food crops. There is also conserving of food by grain banks, etc., which the people are doing, and also growing alternate crops. So, and we have also involved the women, because in many of the areas, women are the main farmers. But unfortunately, we do not realize this, and women farmers are not given their rights, and it is a male dominated world because of the patriarchy. And though women do 60 to 70% of the agricultural work, they are completely not recognized by the system. So if we can garner community knowledge and realize the wisdom of the people, then we can make these invisible talents visible. And if we can make the community which is invisible visible, we will be able to conserve groundwater, and whatever be the SDG 6, we can achieve the goals by the year 2030. So thank you for inviting me. I feel that we should do more, and together, if all of us work, we can make a difference to the water situation in the country, not only in Rajasthan, but across India. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cherian. You have made a number of important points. I'm just going to highlight a few of them. Important words or phrases like local knowledge, community knowledge, appropriate trees, then this watershed development, and all this taken together tells me that we need to take a holistic approach, which is perhaps is missing, still missing in our country. I'm sure that there must be a lot of work going on for water modeling, taking into account all these factors. But what we need to do, as you said rightly towards the end of your presentation, that there is need for political push at one level and for political buy-in at another level. Unless they match, I'm not saying properly, absolutely, but in a larger sense, it will be difficult for us to take forward this agenda. So you have made a note of your suggestions, and we'll see that how best we can take them forward. On that note, let me now come to Shubha Ramachandran. She is the head of the water team in Biomi Environmental Trust based in Bengaluru. And I understand that she is going to tell us a story, and very appropriate, good story, which is from her campaign, Million Wells campaign in Bengaluru. So over to you, Sudha, in about 8 to 10 minutes.
Sure, yeah. Thank you very much for the invitation, and good evening, everybody. I'm Shubha Ramachandran. I'm speaking on behalf of the Biome Environmental Trust. It's a group based out of Bangalore, so a lot of the experiences and the thoughts that I share will be urban or in an urbanizing context. Uh, Given today's theme of groundwater being invisible, I would say all of our water is pretty much invisible to us in a city. We turn on our taps and the water comes to us. You ask most people, it's likely they don't really know where it's coming from or the energy that goes into bringing the water right to their taps. Similarly, the water that goes out of our houses, that's not very well known to many either. Where does our wastewater go? How does it get used? How does it get treated? So all of this is perhaps encompassed in what we want to bring out today as part of the World Water, the theme for the World Water Day. I shall, however, specifically focus on groundwater and the work that we've been doing. As an organization in urban areas, we work on water conservation, starting from how do you manage your demand, how do you harvest rainwater? And when I say harvest rainwater, I mean both storage and reuse of rainwater. And there is a lot to be spoken about that, because even though this rain falls on us, I would say it's still largely invisible. People don't know the volume of rain that a city receives. For instance, our own city, Bangalore, every day the daily water requirement is 1,500 million liters per day. And the rainfall that we get on our city of about 1,000 square kilometers of 970 millimeters annual rainfall is equivalent to 3,000 million liters per day. So just to emphasize, the water that I need every day is only 1,500, and the equivalent rainfall that falls on me is 3,000 million liters. Given that the city gets its water from the river Kaveri far away, there is recycling of water. And if we were to look at our rainwater too, there are various ways in which we could manage our water much better. And this is a city for which even Niti Aayog said that we would run out of our groundwater by 2020. And now coming to groundwater itself, many times when we speak of groundwater in the city, our focus is on bore wells. In our city right now, the bore wells are as deep as 2,500 feet. In fact, we jokingly say that perhaps we are going deep enough that we may be getting water from the Kaveri itself. The Kaveri River flows 100 kilometers away from Bangalore and 300 meters below the elevation of Bangalore. And even though we look to the river as a source of water, what we see not only in Bangalore, but in most cities across the country is that more than 50% or close to 50% of the water requirement is actually being met with groundwater. And we still don't know a lot about it. And our focus is really on groundwater extraction. So the campaign that we have run in our city, so as a group, we've been working on groundwater recharge, and the kind of recharge structures that we promote are called recharge wells. This takes into account the hydrogeology of the city, as well as the presence of lakes in the city, and also the fact that the city has no perennial rivers and has been a groundwater dependent city. Our attempt has been to tell people about the presence of a shallow aquifer, to tell them that water can be available at 10, 20, 30 feet below ground level if it were to be managed well. And one way to go about with this is to identify these old open wells that exist in various ways across the city. How do we revive them, rejuvenate them, recharge them, talk about them? And the whole emphasis here is about awareness. For instance, in the center of the city, there is a park called the Kabban Park, which is spread on 200 acres of land. The park was buying water to irrigate the park itself. Over a period of time, we have revived 7 old open wells, and these open wells are really beautiful, 15, 20, 30 feet in diameter, able to provide close to 50,000 liters of water per day. not only sufficient for the park, but for the areas around it as well. So we've been trying to rejuvenate these wells in public spaces as well as private spaces, get more and more people to talk about it, not only look at the well as a source of water, but also look at it as a place where you can put water into the ground for groundwater recharge. So at this very park where 7 old open wells have been revived for groundwater withdrawal, 74 recharge wells have also been dug to put water into the ground. And the whole idea is to tell people that while our bore wells may be quite invisible to us, because even if I were to look into a bore well, I can't really see where the water flows. But when I look into an open well, the open well really talks to me. It tells me about the quality of water, it tells me the season, it tells me if water is available or not. Over a period of time, and with modernization or the way we have moved, we have lost our focus on the open wells, and we've moved all our energies to the deep borewell recharge and the deeper aquifers. What we are trying to do is make a case for the shallow aquifer to get more people to know about it, to create some kind of catalytic action such that in public places, these wells are revived, they are recharged. In many cases, we also see that it very efficiently mitigates urban flooding. So since our cities are all paved up, the water really has no place to flow to. But if you were to dig many of these recharge wells, the water soaks into the ground, prevents urban flooding. And these stories need to be told. We're also tying up with the university students such that these stories are not only told, but are monitored. The engineering college students are able to go around, pick up data in terms of water quality and the differences to the water table that this kind of groundwater recharge can result in. A lot of the information and what we are speaking about, we've set up a website called bengaluru.urbanwaters.in. The idea is to set up a similar site for pretty much every town or every city in the country, where each city tells the story of its water, tells the story of the water service providers, because in groundwater for bore wells, we as much look to hydrogeologists as we look to water diviners. So who are these water diviners? Where do they find water? What is the water quality like? So a lot of information, and also about those people who are following best practices for water management, how schools can manage their water better. All of this information is available on bengaluru.urbanwaters.in. Since we have a large group here, I would also request you all to take a look, and you can reach out to us from the website itself. And if you want to set up something similar for, or add your city or town to this website, that would be great, because we all need to be these storytellers talking about the story of water in our city, about heritage also plays a great angle in the recharge in groundwater management. And the other key point I would like to highlight is that we have been working with a traditional community of well diggers who are called the Mannuvadars. So while we are looking at groundwater recharge as a source to deal with our water security and also to mitigate flooding, we are also looking at it as a livelihood opportunity. As we work with different cities across the country, what we realize that there are not so many more well diggers left who are willing to go 30, 40, 50, even 60 feet into the ground, manually digging, desilting, strengthening these wells. So yeah, I think I'd kind of come to a close with that. There are very many more deeper stories of individuals, of gated communities that have actually managed to raise their groundwater table from, over a period of 10 years, from 1,000 feet to 360 feet below ground level, all as a result of managing their groundwater better with recharge wells. So that's really our campaign, about 1 million wells for Bengaluru. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Subha. So thank you, Sudhap, for telling us this story, or stories behind stories. The point which I would like to highlight is that the data which you have provided, first data, that my understanding is that there is enough water, but we don't know how to use or reuse it, A, and B, perhaps unknowingly, knowingly or unknowingly, we are abusing whatever it is available. So there is a lot of awareness generation and such things are needed. I see some hands have also written. I'll come to them. But I would request you to raise your hand, not to write to you in the chat box after that experience. So let me now come to Joydeep. He is the South Asia Director of the Third Pole, which is a very renowned magazine in our part of the world, working on water issues, river issues, transboundary rivers, climate change, adaptation, mitigation, all these things. And we have been partnering with Third Pole on transboundary rivers of South Asia, that one particular project. And I would request Joydeep for your thoughts on this subject in about 8 to 10 minutes.
Thank you, Bipul, and greetings to everybody in the World Water Day period, and my respects on Shahidi Divas. Actually, my job has been made very simple by the previous speakers. Gopal Krishna ji gave us the overall framework of India's water policy and India's water situation. Matthew told us about how traditional knowledge about water is absolutely essential for groundwater. And Shubha told us how to apply that knowledge and how to use that knowledge along with very modern technologies and information and knowledge systems in an urban setting. Now, as Bipul explained, I'm a journalist who has been following this subject. So I'm going to try to put this together and then come to one of the questions that Bipul raised right in the beginning, that what are the possible solutions that we can be looking at? So the first point that comes to my mind is that in groundwater, we have a crisis, and a crisis in our country, which is of Himalayan proportions, because we are the largest groundwater user in the world in irrigation. Of all the groundwater in the world that is used in agriculture, India uses 40%. And this is definitely not a sustainable situation. We have to also look at our country not as as one ecosystem. It's too big a country. In many ways, there are two very large ecosystems when it comes to groundwater in which we should probably split our country. One is the Ganga-Brahmaputra basin. The Ganga-Brahmaputra basin, because of its perennial rivers and because of its large rivers, still is able to support more groundwater extraction than the rest of the country. And the rest of the country is 60% of the country. Entire Western India, entire Southern India, and in Eastern India, the Chotanagpur Plateau or the hills of Northeast and parts of the Himalayas. So, well over 60% of the country, we have a very severe groundwater crisis. I don't know how many of you are aware of this, but in the entire Himalayas, where the maximum number of people live in the middle Himalayas, in about 4,000 to 7,000 feet elevation, the biggest cause of people being forced to leave their homes today is that springs are drying up. Their springs on which they're dependent, both for their household water use and for their irrigation, are drying up by November or December. And till the next monsoon, they do not know where to get the water from unless they go right down to the bottom of the slope, to the river. And you can well imagine what this means to the women of the household. This is also a huge gender issue. They're spending 2, 3, 4 hours a day walking down and up steep Himalayan slopes, or in the very hot Rajasthan desert, or in the very stony areas of Bundelkhand or Marathwada or Vidarbha, fetching water. And this is the groundwater crisis that we have. And this is something that we are not paying enough attention to. We still have a situation, despite the very laudable objectives of the national water policy that Matthew referred to, the other policies that Gopal Krishna ji referred to, we still have a situation where in most parts of the country, whoever has the might just puts in a well, and there are very few ways to control that person. The biggest example, probably after the ones that Matthew mentioned in Rajasthan, in Manaklao, is a very good example. The other example, big example, comes from Marathwada, where again a water scarce region, a semi-arid part of the country, where the bigger the farmer you are, the more acreage you have, the deeper you dig your borewell, and you extract all the water. The result is all the smallholder farmers around you find that their wells have gone dry. All of you know about water trains going to Latur. All of you know about water trains going to other parts of Marathwada. And why is this happening? Because of irrational use of groundwater. That is what's happening. I'm not going to spend a lot of time giving more examples of the crises. All of us know this. If you want more examples, ask me and I will say. Let me go to solutions. Let's talk about solutions. One is the kind of solution that Matthew talked about, that yes, use traditional knowledge. As Shubha talked about, use combine traditional knowledge and modern knowledge and have sustainable extraction models. The problem with that I see as a journalist covering this is that I'm often told that the problem with this is they're not being scaled out or scaled up. That is not the problem. You cannot just replicate a water solution, even from one village to the next, in many cases. So do not talk blindly of scaling up and scaling out. Water is a micro environment issue. The groundwater in a village is the way it sits, the way the aquifer is not necessarily the same as in the next village. Yes, there are lots to be learned. There are lots to be learned about the way people have worked it out in places like the ones that where NGOs are working. CARE is a very good example. Water and Watershed Organization Trust has very good examples in Maharashtra and other states. There are excellent examples, and there are lots to learn on how to use groundwater sustainably. After all, we have been using groundwater sustainably for 10,000 years. But the important part is not to blindly copy one model from one block to the next, one district to the next, one state to the next. They're not the same because the microenvironment changes. The principles remain the same. To that, I will refer to one particular model and stop there for comments. And that model is the Andhra Pradesh model of water allocation by farmers' cooperatives. In very simple terms, there are many details, but in very simple terms, it is the model that the start of every sowing season, the Pani Panchayat gets together and the farmers sit and say, okay, you need so much water, and this is the amount of water available, going by the pedometers that we have all learned to use. And this is the water we are seeing, we are finding through our methods and through what the scientists and bureaucrats are telling us. So this is the water you're going to get. Therefore, knowing this is the water you're going to get for this sowing season, come on, tell me, are you going to plant rice? Are you going to plant chilies? Are you going to plant bajra? Or what are you going to plant? And this is a model that's been working very well. And I would say that this is one of the things, one of the two things that we really need to push. The other thing we obviously really need to push is to stop flood irrigation, the most wasteful form of irrigation. We definitely need to move to sprinkler irrigation and drip irrigation. This is, I know that the government has got many schemes to push it. The government is trying at central and state levels, but it's not working. I can tell you from my experiences from villages, it's not working at anywhere near the level that it needs to work. One of the saddest moments of my career as a journalist was from a pump shop in Jhansi, where I went to the yard behind the shop and saw meters and meters and meters of drip irrigation pipes lying around. And I asked the shopkeeper what's going on, what is this doing here? And he said, the government gives subsidy. Any farmer comes to buy a pump, we give them the drip irrigation pipes alongside. But the farmers don't want it. They just dump it at the end, and then they go away. And since they go away, having dumped it, there is no other place to keep it. We definitely need to find ways to solve this basic problem of how to rationalize our groundwater use. Thank you very much.
Deep, after hearing all of you, it is very clear that the role of the local government or local governance institution like panchayats, like municipalities, that's very, very critical in this context. And we don't know much about that. We do know that at the panchayat level, there is this biodiversity committee. In most places, it's dysfunctional. That's another matter. So that is something, I think it is the responsibility of the NGOs, the civil society and community-based organizations to work along with local governance institutions to address these challenges with appropriate solutions. One size fits all approach is not going to work. Of course, there are also regulatory issues at various levels, not just at the local level, but also beyond local, even at the national level. That is something we need to look at parallelly. On that note, let me now hand over the proceedings to Mr. Mehta. You may have some queries, clarifications, questions. You can put them. I mean, we have cleared those elements from this platform. You can put your questions in the chat box or raise your hand, but over to you, Mr. Mehta.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Very good. I'm sorry to be late. I was to have moderated this event, but I got held up in a meeting and there was just no way I could have made it. So my humble apologies once again. And it was what I could hear. Fortunately, I was able to hear most of the discussions that took place. Very enlightening and indeed very challenging, which is often the case. And we've been dealing with this issue of water, whether it is groundwater or rainwater, whatever, river water, for donkey's years. And as Joydeep Gupta and particularly Shubha, Matthew and all spoke about, indeed, sometimes it doesn't appear, Gopalji, that we have made any progress in that direction. And that is a big challenge. That how do you disaggregate the challenges or disaggregate the solutions and see to that if we can take it forward, even in a pilot model in places which could be done, and that could be then replicated around the region as such. But what is very clear is that we have little time, and I wish Vipul, you could have managed the speakers to allow them to raise questions. So I may have 4 more minutes left. It might be useful if there are anybody with any burning question. I'm speaking to the audience. Do anybody have a burning question which could not, would you like to raise to the speaker, to the panelists, or? None. If with that, I think we've had a fairly good interaction among all the panelists. So what I particularly liked was one major solution which was proposed by Gopalji. This I'm sure he can carry through, considering that he is and also the economic spokesperson for the ruling party, the BJP. The framework law which you spoke about, Gopalji, is something very, very critical. We require a framework law where we'll have to bring in all the states together in that. That would be the other thing. And more importantly, as Vipul pointed out, we often ignore the subaltern governments. We ignore the local governments, municipalities and the panchayats. And those are the people which have to be empowered. And fortunately, we'll go back to Article 73, 74, and whether it is being truly and properly implemented. 73 was to a large extent, but 74 is still, not meaningfully implemented in our country. And that, so even if we talk about water as an issue, and besides other issues, we do need to empower locally. Secondly, as Bipul pointed out, at the policy level, we require a whole of government approach. Many of these things will cross across ministries. Ministry of Agriculture will play a very important part, as Matthew pointed out, whether we are able to, promote the right agriculture or not, or right forestry. Again, Ministry of Environment and Forestry, which is very crucially related to water. Other than the Water Resources Ministry, which this government has set up, fortunately, it has given that kind of attention. But in terms of what I heard from some of the panelists, in the old water harvesting structures that we had, I remember when Vasundhara Raje was the chief minister in Rajasthan, she launched a mission to revive the old bodies or the wells. And a lot of good things had taken place in the sense that many of these old structures, other people tend to forget them, that and they depend upon something else. So simultaneously, what the government is doing now is talking about pipe water supply to every village possible, which of course is a massive project. It's not as easy as electricity. You require water availability as well as the kind of distribution which will be required. How do we go about finding a kind of a common solution to these problems through the whole of government approach, which is extremely important and critical? So we have these various ministries. At least if there's if Gopalji, you can organize a meeting with these. Thank you, Matthew. Understood. You stayed for a long time, and of course, an excellent input. Gopalji, so there's a lot. You've already published this book, and you've applied yourself very, very thoroughly to this problem. Perhaps the next phase of that book, or at least the recommendations coming from that book and this particular event, could be taken forward by you, which will be very helpful. And I'm sure whether it is Joydeep or Shubha or Matthew, and they'll all be very happy to collaborate with you in terms of taking forward the discussions at this particular event. And how do we do that? And you have all our support as well. With that, let me thank Gopalji. Do you have anything to say?
Yeah, just briefly, I would like to just say
Sure.
that cuts can take the inputs on the National Water Framework Law is a need of the hour, because
Right.
because as you all also mentioned, that the clarity on the pricing and conservation, demand management, because the government is at our state and central level is very clear that we have to provide water to the public as a merit or a public good. But the issue is about the pricing. That is not very clear on many policy discussions and debates. Where
Right.
what the pricing of competing uses, etc. So if there is a clarity on the that issue, and about conservation or groundwater ownership, all these issues are consolidated bill. If there is a consensus on this, that bill can help the policy implementation at
Very
the
good.
state and the local bodies level.
Thank you very much, Gopalji. This is very reassuring, and so that we have a concrete agenda which came out of this particular meeting. That has been Kutch's philosophy, that we don't organize meetings for the sake of meetings, but for the sake of seeing as to how progress can be made for our national benefit as well as our own purpose that we are in. With that, let me thank Gopalji, Shubha, Joydeep, um, and Matthew, of course, is left, so in absence. And thanks, Bipul, for excellent moderation. Listening to your very acute remarks. Let me wish you goodbye to all of you.